So hello good people of the internet, it is I, Tommy Kelly, and this is Adventures in Woo Woo. So hello and welcome to another episode of Adventures in Woo Woo. In this episode we have two kind of major themes going on. One is I'm talking about pendulums, how to use them, kind of the ideas behind why they work, and a bit of history about how I use them and some of the pitfalls and limitations that I have come across from using pendulums. The second part of the show is a kind of a follow-up or a sequel to what we started last week, which was me trying to contact my spirit guardian or my guardian angel or my guide or whatever word we have for these things. But within that, I also described the process of how to make a sigil. So even if you're not too interested in me contacting my spirit guide, you might find something interesting about how to create sigils if you haven't come across that before. We also have a bit of a divination session where I use the pendulum to divine some answers from the patrons. So let's get straight into this. So I want to talk a bit about pendulums. Pendulums were one of the very first divination systems that I ever used. I came across it about the same time as I came across bibliomancy, which I talked about a couple of episodes ago. Again, it was my aunt who showed me how to do it, and she did it very simply. She just had a ring on a piece of string, and there was no fancy crystals or any of those type of things. And I just found it fascinating, and I got into it. And the problem was, what happened is then I was quite young and I used it for a few years, but I got a bit too obsessed with the answers and I got a bit too into the mindset that it was infallible. And so if I was asking would this thing happen, and then it would say no, it wasn't going to happen, I got quite down about it, say, or a bit depressed about it, thinking that this was the end, the final word and all of these things, and that because it had said no, that there was in no way this was going to happen. And I started getting a very kind of constant negative results from it, and I think what I learned from it probably was that it was more reflective of my mood than it was of any kind of tapping into any sort of greater knowledge. But there's a kind of a lot of different ways that people use pendulums, and a lot of different ways that how to think it works. One thing I find very interesting is that pendulums are very similar to the whole idea of dowsing, which is, obviously seen pictures of them where people hold two kind of sticks and go around and look for water or something like that, and when they find water, underground water, the sticks cross or they do some sort of action whatsoever. And that's a very woo-woo idea, and I don't think there's any kind of real scientific reasoning behind it, because there's some sort of energetic model to it where water must be emitting some sort of frequency or something that can be picked up with two metal rods. But when my friend was building his house a number of years ago, and they needed to find an underground source of water for their house, for the well, for to drink and for all their kind of utilities and stuff like that, they hired a guy, and it was the standard practices that you hire a guy who comes out and douses and finds water. And he came out, walked around the field or walked around the site, his things went like that, and they found underground water, and it's worked perfectly ever since. So I don't know if it's that hard to actually find water, and could it be just a random chance that this guy has got a good scam going. But it was like the builders and the architects and all that all suggest this, so it's a thing that happens regularly enough, in the same way that they would suggest, a bricklayer or a windows guy or whatever. So there's that kind of element of it where it is used, and people do use it for allergy testing as well, and they've used it for kind of in an energetic sense of seeing if there's bad energy or blockages, not only on bodies, but using maps and floor plans and stuff like that, where you can see if there's some sort of energy block and stuff like that. So there's a lot of uses in that way, rather than just divination. People use it to find lost items, where they will put it over a map of an area and see if it makes any kind of if it makes a movement over where something should be. And of course you have the people who've done, have tried to find dead bodies or treasure or any of these things using the same type of principles. Not if it was, there's no huge famous story about it really that springs to mind, but there's plenty of stories you hear about these type of things, of people using dowsing or pendulums or that kind of thing in that kind of work. But you hear a lot of stories and people say a lot of things. So the kind of limitations of pendulums, particularly if you're using it for divination, is that you're very limited in the kind of answers that you're going to get. You're pretty much bound to a yes, no, with a maybe and a don't know or something equivalent to them as well. So you have like up and back, left and right, clockwise and anti-clockwise. So you have 4 kind of answers. Now I have seen charts and I have seen sheets and ideas where, you know, you can go by a whole series of swings that will, you know, A, B, C, D, E. But that seems extremely tedious and annoying, you know, to use that kind of way. And you'd have to be really, you know, precise in what it is. Like, because there's so many letters to get within a short space, how do you know it's an S or a T or a U or whatever? You know, you're really kind of pushing it, I think, to be honest. But some people are good at doing it that way, and don't let my kind of lack of patience with it put you off. If you want to go that way, obviously go that way. So the best kind of way to get a pendulum is to buy one, and you can get them as fancy as you want and as not fancy as you want. You know, you can get crystals and, you know, spare no expense. But you can just go with the, you know, a chain or a string and put a ring on it or any kind of a weight. They say not to use a wedding ring because that has its own energy and will have its own personality. But I've used wedding rings and I've used any kind of things and it worked quite well. One thing I got really, really good at was finding out the sex of babies while you know, they were still inside the woman, while the woman was still pregnant. And I had a very high hit rate, like very successful in that for years, up until a few years ago, and then I just can't do it at all. I got everything wrong since. But at one stage, quite successful at that. Not sure how you turn that into a full-time job. It's not quite finding underground water. But and that would have been for just using rings or something like that. Maybe that's what it is, because it stopped being so effective when I brought my own pendulum. So maybe you have to use something of the mother's within the divination to find out the sex of the child. Not to assume anyone's gender at that early age or anything like that. So the best way to practice it or to start using a pendulum is to try and work out how it works for you. And so just get the pendulum, hold it, and say yes over and back in your mind, and it's already doing it for me. That's my yes. And then stop it and say no, and then it goes back and forth. No. Yours might be different though, that's the point. Your clockwise might be yes for you, anti-clockwise might be no for you, and up and down is maybe, and that. So find out what it is for you rather than going with kind of any kind of standard thing. And then practice it, and then, you know, come up with kind of different ideas of questions to ask. I find that it was really good with knowledge and stuff that I could know but just didn't know, but wasn't particularly good at predictive stuff. It wasn't great at seeing into the future, and it wasn't great at certainly long-term forecasting. I used to set up systems where I'd, you know, ask it questions every day to test it out and see how accurate it would be, and predictive-wise it wasn't really that accurate, which would lead me to believe that the pendulum is in some way just accessing knowledge you have rather than any kind of knowledge, greater knowledge. So if anything, it's tapping into your subconscious, so it's getting to another level of you, which is handy because you don't normally have access to that kind of thing. So it will remember stuff that you can't remember, or will have knowledge to stuff that you can't consciously be aware of, but possibly, in my experience anyway, it won't have knowledge of stuff that you or have not had any knowledge of. Some people think it does and are very successful in that way, and saying that not only does it have access to your subconscious, but it has access to everyone's subconscious, or the collective unconscious, as Jung called it. So this kind of storehouse of all knowledge and all experience, sometimes called the Akashic record too. It's a kind of form like that, this hall of records where every experience anyone has ever had is in some way collected in a collective unconscious that people are able to tap into. So perhaps that is what it's allowing you to do. Perhaps it's working on some sort of energetic model. The water thing would suggest that, and allergy testing stuff would suggest that too. There's kind of an energy thing to it. But, you know, try it out yourself and see how you find it and what it's good for, and what uses you have. With the whole thing of don't take it too seriously, because I did take it too seriously at one point, and I took it too much that it was the wise oracle that knew all things. So I would suggest test it, do things like I used to do things where I'd set up questions and I'd go, will the postman come today? Will I get a letter today? And then, then beside it, tick if it happened as the pendulum said. The pendulum said yes, did that happen? No. And that's how I found out it wasn't particularly good predictive wise, but it was good in other ways, good into tapping into my own subconscious and finding out stuff like that. But you might find better uses for it or different uses for it, and you might find it extremely useful in a predictive sense. So what we're going to do today is I got some patrons and a few people on the social medias to give me some questions, and it's just going to be yes or no questions because that's kind of the limitation you have with the pendulum. There's no kind of in-depth like cards or meanings that you would have of the cards and say tarot or the 40 serpents or that. It's just yes, no, maybe, or don't know. So I asked them to give me some questions that would need a yes or no answer. So we go to the divination table and we'll start doing that. So welcome to the divination table, or as we like to call it in the Kelly household, the dinner table. So I have the questions here, and I'm just going to kind of go through them. I don't want to spend too long on them because if you haven't got a question in, then it's quite boring to be listening to other people's questions, but we'll try our best. So as you can see, I use the elbow on the table method. I hold it between my thumb and my finger. I used to do it like that, then I was told not to do that, so I'll do it this way. And there's a cat hair on it, which is extra luck. So you will notice, because I'm not an ascended master or anything, that my hand will probably move, and it will be from a muscle kind of muscle power that will be doing this pendulum, but we'll try it nonetheless and go for the different questions. Okay. Susie Robertson. Will I get the virtual job I want? And it's virtual as in working from home. So will Susie get the virtual job she wants? Pendulum says yes. Daniel Lockwood. Will Eamon deliver on my request? Interesting sync or coincidence that happened after I immediately heard the word Eamon Ra after I read that question, or received that question yesterday. So there you go. So, will Eamon deliver on Daniel's request? So it looks kind of no, but it's not complete. It's off axis, so it's going round clockwise, which is maybe. So that's super helpful. Louisa, will I get to Bali this year? So will she get to Bali this year? And that's another maybe. Ariana Bluey, should I pursue the podcast idea? Well, I say yes, you should. Just do it. Don't worry about what the pendulum says. Should Ariana Bluey pursue her podcast career, or her podcast idea even? Pendulum says yes. Stephen D. Should I work my arse off swatting for this job interview versus just being myself? Kind of not really a full yes or no. Should Stefan work his arse off swatting for the job interview? Maybe. Melissa Cabine, will I get into a romantic relationship this year? Pendulum says yes. Good luck with that. Wendy Lydigan, you notice that if I try and pronounce your last name really fast, that I'm hoping that you don't realise that I don't pronounce it properly. Am I headed in the right direction with the idea I'm working on? Ooh, mysterious Wendy, very mysterious. Not giving much away now. Is Wendy heading in the right direction? Pendulum says yes. Spirit. Will I get a raise in July, August of this year? Well, we're going to have to, because what if you... Will I get a raise, okay, in July, August of this year? Will she get a raise? Pendulum says yes. Craig, should I move to the south of England? Should Craig move to the south of England? Pendulum says it doesn't know. Kim Sampim, will I get a better paying, life-sustaining job? That's two questions, because you could get a better paying job, but it might be life-sustaining. So we'll just go, will I get a better paying job? Will Kim get a better paying... Stop, Pendulum. Will Kim get a better paying job? Pendulum says yes. Jacqueline Bradley, will I need a passport? Well, there's a time kind of thing at that. Will I need a passport before you die? Will you need a passport this week? Like, will you ever need a passport? I should hope so. At some point. Will Jacqueline ever need a passport? Can't decide whether it's a yes or whether it's a maybe. But it seems more yes than maybe. Andrea Guerra, and I know I don't pronounce your name right, so you may just get over it. If you're Irish, it would be pronounced Andrea Guerra. Will I get my US citizenship? Will she get her US citizenship? Doesn't want to move at all. So very briefly went to yes, and then my arm kind of did a twitch. So I'm going to go, I don't know. I hope you do, if that's something you want. I assume it is. And finally, we have Hugh Hackett. Will my mother's house sell this spring from market price? So this, if you get a yes, doesn't necessarily mean that it won't sell, just that it won't sell from market price. Will Hugh's mother's house sell this spring from market price? And the pendulum says yes. So that's just kind of very simple yes or no things. It can be quite interesting to do it more for yourself than possibly for other people, and it's a good kind of party trick to do, but still needs a bit of kind of practice or whatever. I guarantee when I look back at this video, I'm going to see my arm moving and me twitching and stuff. I certainly noticed a couple of twitches here and there when I was doing it. Again, I will stress, don't take those answers too seriously. I'm not particularly good at pendulums, and I'm not completely convinced that they are of any sort of merit whatsoever, particularly in divination sense, perhaps more in an energetic kind of sense, that if there is anything that you may be able to like get blockages, or possibly the allergy thing, I don't know, that seems a bit too woo even for me. But keep note of what I said, and if they're right, then of course I am awesome and a brilliant divinator. And if they're wrong, then of course there was some sort of interference or lust of result, or the demon had come after me to block my knowledge of your path forward. So try out your pendulum. As I say, it doesn't have to be a fancy one, doesn't have to be anything other than a weight and a piece of string, and see what you come up with. And if you've some good tips for me, or some ideas on how to improve with it, or anything to do with pendulums or dowsing or any of those type of things, or you know, have an interesting story about it, please do leave it in the comments below, or private message me if you want to be anonymous, and I'd love to hear your stories. So get a pendulum, get dowsing, or you know, use your pendulum.
Hi, my name is David Halpin. I run the page The Occult Book Review. I update video reviews periodically. I also write reviews for magazines, and that's taken up a lot of my time recently. What that means is I can't also include the reviews on the video page because there's usually an embargo for a limited period of time anyway. I also run a folklore page called Circle Stories, which is part of my business here in Ireland. I run a folklore resource. I suppose it's a bit of everything. I run reminiscence therapy workshops. What that means is I will go into rehabilitation units, retirement homes, and I will use folklore and I'll talk to patients about customs, traditions, try to instigate memories. As you can imagine, it's quite poignant work. It's also very satisfying work. I suppose what I've begun to realise, I suppose I've always realised it, is that there is very little separation between the occult and folklore anyway, once you get down to the animistic roots. And that could be a problem for some people in today's climate, I suppose. A lot of people want to, what would you say, they want to keep cultures separate, and it's something that is coming up more and more. The whole blur of left and right these days is beyond me. I'm too old for that. I'm on my own journey, really. And I see that the value of folklore is always going to be different simply because of factors such as environment and what people utilize in order to give themselves a sense of purpose and a sense of place. And that in turn manifests a different spiritual and religious framework. And I think that's where a lot of the differences between people lie personally. So you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and as I said, there are two separate areas, but you will find that they tend to overlap sometimes. So thanks a million to Tommy for letting me do this, and maybe I'll chat to you on social media soon.
So as you've probably noticed, I've a new backdrop or a new kind of angle for these videos. Basically, I cleared out one side of my office right beside the window so that I could avail of the amazing natural light that Ireland offers us. But it's not too bad, and it's actually because Ireland's always so cloudy, you get this kind of diffused light. You just don't get an awful lot of it, and you don't get many hours to use it. But it's grand, and I like it, and it kind of has a nice kind of feel to it, and I can look out the window and ponder the universe and feel very solemn and wizardy and those type of things. And particularly with the DJI Pocket, the Osmo, it can follow you around, so you can get the full, you can go for the standard YouTube backdrop of the bookshelf if you want, or you can introduce a nice little plant to make it a bit more lively and a bit more as if there's living energy going on. But if you go too far, you'll see parts of the preschool playground, and it's probably less mystical and a bit more schoolyard, which is fine. I in some way should be able to set my exposure so that the window doesn't come out in it. But yeah, so that's one of the things I wanted to do, is get a place where I can just kind of easily set up and hit record and start talking. The only problem I'm really having is with the second camera, the off camera, because I just can't find a good place for it to sit. No matter where I put it, it just kind of seems a bit odd. And if I have it too far away, I can't see if it's lined up, and I have focus issues with that DSLR because Nikon just haven't got the greatest autofocus, and you have to kind of manually focus or do a mixture of both. But I'll work it out. The second camera is very handy if you have to do any sort of ninja edits or stuff like that. It just makes it a bit less obvious, because I don't really enjoy that kind of jump cut thing that YouTube people do. Even though I understand the reason behind it, and it certainly gets you, to the message quicker, but I find it quite jarring. In some people do it very well, and some people are able to get away with it, and it doesn't annoy me. But other people, it really brings attention to the editing rather than whatever they're talking about. So I don't really want to do that. So the second camera is handy in that kind of way. Not that I do an awful lot of editing. If you have noticed, I tend to leave in an awful lot of my stumbles and my umsies and ahsies. But yeah, so this is going to be, for the next while, the backdrop to most of my talking head bits. But I do want to get out and do a bit of vlogging and stuff like that. It's just at the minute it's very hard, because with the Pocket, the Osmo, if it's windy in any kind of a fashion, it's just no good whatsoever. The audio is just terrible on it. and I have to wait until the adapter is released by DJI where I can plug in the lavalier mic, and that should take away an awful lot of the wind noises. But then I suppose you're less mobile because you have a string attached to you. Anyway, all of these things. I will be hopefully doing some outdoor stuff over the summer anyway when it's less windy, and maybe I won't need the adapter. So anyway, on to the show. So last week on the show I started a new kind of segment, which was me trying to contact my spirit guide, or at least a spirit or entity or feeling or idea, a thought that I've had from early childhood, that there's this kind of female guiding energy around me. And I was trying in some way to contact that, or to get it to contact me. And I was using EVP, which is electronic voice phenomena, which is basically you use a tape recorder, in this case it was a phone, and you ask questions to the ether, and you try and get a response. And of course, we didn't get any response. And technically, the whole kind of thing was a bit not my finest moment, but it was a start nonetheless. I think one of the problems was that I didn't describe, or I didn't explain what I wanted the spirit or my guide to do, and just sort of assumed that it knew what EVP was, which is, odd. Why would it know? And I was kind of looking at other people doing the EVP, and to definitely explain more what effect or what they're looking for. Which is odd that I forgot that, because I very much, my magic, or when I'm dealing with kind of archetypes or spirits or demons or any of these things, I do talk out loud as if I'm talking to someone in the room. And I didn't in this case, so I assume it was just a case that being with the video cameras on and that kind of thing, that it just got distracted and just not as relaxed as I normally would, and not in the zone as I would be. So next time I do it, I'm going to announce what I want to happen, explain more about the process, explain what the phone is, explain how I'm recording it, and what I want from this spirit or guide. I should probably also try not to limit in the sense of using words like spirits or guide or whatever, or come up with some kind of way of encapsulating that idea that leaves it as open as possible. Particularly as this week I'm going to be doing a sigil on how to enable this contact further, so I want to keep it as kind of open as possible, but we'll get to that in a bit. Another kind of very interesting feedback that I got was that my friend Leah was talking to me, sent me a message after she'd seen the video, and she had done a kind of a soul retrieval shamanic type thing for me years ago, and I was finding my spirit animal. And she came back and she says it was kind of like a polar bear that she found, or that's this thing. And I kind of polar bear, I don't really have any kind of polar bear attachment whatsoever. But her point was that the teddy bear that I feel is some way connected to this spirit or this guide, or whatever word I want to use for it, is a teddy bear VT, and looks a bit like a polar bear, if you want to put, has that kind of same kind of features or whatever, and in a kind of astral plane type way could certainly be mistaken for it. So I found that interesting, and I thought that was quite not funny in a ha 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 funny, but funny, funny peculiar, funny strange, funny in a magic or sort of sense. There's a bit of a sync there or whatever. So for the next part, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a sigil. I'm going to make a sigil where I'm going to try and instigate further spirit contact without, kind of limiting to an EVP or to rapping on the walls or some sort of thing. Just a general kind of get in contact with me, I want to talk to you kind of thing. Also has the benefit of, if you don't know how to make a sigil, then I'll explain it from start to finish, and you then will be able to make your own sigils for anything that you particularly would want to do. So let's move over to that bit. So if you've never done sigils before, basically the whole idea is that you're going to take an affirmation or a statement of intent, and then you condense it into a pictorial glyph or image that is in some way magic to you, or looks magic to you, that you've imbued some sort of magic into it, that you then launch into either your subconscious, into the greater consciousness, or into the world, whatever way you want to look at it, and then it becomes its own kind of agent which manifests in the world. Or it's kind of like taking something like a program and trying to hack the matrix, if that's another analogy you would like to think of. I find them very successful. It's something I do an awful lot of, and if it's a thing that you want to get more into, the person you should go see is Gordon White from RuneSoup, who is, you know, the sigil guy. Basically, he is. That's how he was originally. I came across him anyway. It was his post from 2010 on RuneSoup, which includes the whole idea of robofish and shoaling and all of those wonderful things that I won't go into now because it's, you know, we're trying to keep this simple. But if you are interested more in sigils, then definitely check him out. He's a brilliant course in sigils as well as part of the premium membership on RuneSoup, so check that out as well. So what we're going to do is basically do a sigil to try and get my spirit, my helper, my spirit guide to contact me, or for me be able to hear it. So when you're doing kind of a statement of intent, you have to leave it kind of open enough that to not limit it, or to not kind of make it too hard to manifest. You know, give it some room to do its own thing. You know, don't try to impose too much on it. But at the same time, have something that you know when it'll work. Like, it's easy to say, I will, you know, increase my wealth, say, but finding 50 cent on the ground is increasing your wealth. So you could go, well, is that my sigil, or is that just finding 50 cent? And all those things. So what you need to do is to have a statement of intent that's open enough to allow for wondrous possibilities, but specific enough that you'll know that that's definitely it when it works, or that you have some type of terms in it. Like if you go, increase my wealth, but when? In 50 years? You know, like a better thing than in increasing my wealth is 10% increase in my salary before the end of the year, because then you either know if that happened or it didn't. You know, increasing wealth could be under many things. Like if you suddenly had a decrease in your cost of living, it definitely feels like you have more money, but it's not an increase in wealth, and all of these type of things. So I've been trying to think of what my statement of intent should be, and I'm thinking of something along the lines of confirmed contact with guardian spirit. Confirmed because then it's confirming that it actually happens. It's more than just I hear something, oh, is that it? Or there's a knocking, and you go, oh, you know, is that the knocking? Or an EVP kind of a voice or something like that. So it's a confirmed contact. How that's to be confirmed, I don't know. And the contact is also, I'm not trying to limit it in the sense of, you know, like physical contact. So I'm happy enough with a dream contact. I'm happy enough with feelings or sensations or anything. Once I know that that's what it is, and there can be no question of what it is. The guardian spirit, I kind of have a problem with it all, because what if it's not, wouldn't describe itself as one, a spirit, or two, as a guardian. But I can't think of anything else that kind of encapsulates that idea of what I think it is. So that's the best I can come up with. So I will just switch on my other camera so that you can see as I write. So hopefully you can see this. Confirmed contact with guardian spirit. Last time I did a sigil on a YouTube video, and I did it this way. I left out a letter, I left out an S, and people pointed that out to me in the comments. So I'm quite likely to do something quite as bad too. But my sigil worked the last time, so there you go. So the next thing you do once you have your statement of intent is that you remove all of the vowels. So start off with doing that. The magic of that really is, or the idea behind that is that you're trying to simplify the sentence, and getting rid of the vowels is as good of a way of simplifying anything, you know, words as you can get. After that, you cross out any of the letters that are repeating. So you go C, yes, that's repeating, so we get rid of that, get rid of all the C's. N, yep, we have N's. F, no other F. So then you're left with a number of letters. that you will then kind of simplify and try to make kind of a magic type glyph or picture or symbol out of them. Something that feels magical to you, and you'll know when it's done, because you'll go, there it is. So let me do that now. Okay, I'm happy with this one here. I think that looks good. See it? So then, kind of make it a bit fancier. And I put it on black card with gold paint or gold marker because Gordon White suggested that, and I like it, so I'm going to do that. So I have a number of gold pens here. So let's do this. It's a bit dull, not so shiny, so I'm not completely happy with that. So that's how it came out. Might see it better here. So the next thing you have to do then is in some way launch it into the world or activate it. My kind of recent ones I've been doing, and I showed it in a previous episode, was to do a sigil offering where I leave it in a public place with some coins on top of it, and that's what I'm going to do with this one. And that'll be my activation of it. So I'll let you know how it works or how it doesn't work, or what's the kind of the outcome from it. Grant Morrison says that it usually happens in some sort of tree thing, where it'd be 3 hours, 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years. I'm not sure that's completely the way it works for me, but I have noticed some sort of pattern in it previously, but not, you know, it's not as a rule. As a kind of a general habit, it sometimes comes out in patterns like that. So try out your own sigils. It can be for anything. It doesn't have to be for contacting spirit guides, for literally anything that a desire you want. Get a statement of intent, get it so that it's loose enough to, you know, allow for any kind of magic to happen, but tight enough so that, you know, there's a definite, you know, when it happens, when it resolves, and when it manifests, you can point to it and go, that's exactly what I was looking for. Then find a way of activating it. There's loads of different ways of activating it. Intense music, anger, love, sorrow, plenty of things. You know, just come up with any sort of kind of extreme emotion or extreme feelings or situations, like a roller coaster. Go on a roller coaster, and at the height of the roller coaster, have a look at it. There's, you know, do it at the point of orgasm. All of those things. Try different ways, whatever. The sigil activate or the sigil offering thing seems to work for me, so that's the way I'm going to do it. Sometimes I just leave it on my notice board and it works just as well. About 60% of the time, sigils work for me. And the more I want something, the less likely it is to happen. And the less I care about it, the more likely it is to happen. But a good round ballpark figure is 60%. 6 out of 10 sigils will work. So let's hope that this is one of the 6 that works. So that was another episode of Adventures from Woo-Woo, and thanks very much for having a watch. I'm trying my best to keep these end pieces to be succinct and short as possible, because I have a tendency to rant when it comes to these end bits, where I'm trying to get my call to action out and get you to follow up and hang around and, you know, subscribe and like and all these things. But basically, go to adventuresandwoowoo.com and everything you could possibly want will be there. All the links to the social media, to the YouTube, to the podcasts, to the magic primers, to the fortune after, all of that stuff is over there. So, good people of the internet, may you have a wonderful week, and I will see you next week.